We welcome you to the Controversial Topics Forum with your host, Rich Cook. We have a really controversial subject today. Wait till you hear.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit the other week, a few weeks ago, about Zionism and the idea of the Israelites, or at least the tribe of Judah, along with Benjamin and Levi, going back to the land. And so that's, from my perspective, and I'm sure even earlier than I was born in the 70s. So it's extended earlier than that, as I can assume that Jackson and those of you older than me would say that once Israel became a nation in 1948, that most Protestants, or at least charismatic Pentecostal types, looked at that as at least the beginning of, if not the complete fulfillment of Scripture. Would that be a correct assertion, Jackson?
Oh, yes, except what makes you think that there are any older people in here than you?
Well, I suppose that some of you could, or all of you could be younger than me. But
if they're older, they won't be able to remember this anyway,
That's true. I was going to say, for those of you that are on here, if everybody is younger than me, then the Chris Ledoux song, it's the years, not the miles, is certainly apropos. Wait a minute, did I get that wrong? It's not the years, it's the miles. There we go. I got it right there. So anyway, so what was, I don't know, Jackson, maybe whoever else was in Protestantism in around the time, or just after the time, was 1948, so in the 50s and 60s. What was it like when that happened? I mean, what was the church's response to that publicly?
I think that probably the response that I remember well was in 1967.
The 6-Day War.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, I was in the charismatic Pentecostal movement then as a young lad, and very up on these kind of things at that time. And it was just like, awesome excitement in the church about how that all came about.
Okay, and I actually did a little bit of studying a while ago, and I don't have any of the paperwork with me, but I do remember a general theme that there were some, at least, I don't know if it was a majority, but it was a big enough of a movement or a thought process, thought paradigm within Protestantism that felt prior to 1948, so in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, that the idea of the 10 tribes, as well as those that were known to be Jews, as we refer to them today, would all be coming back to the land, which I thought was interesting, that even back then, this sort of theme was running through the charismatic and Pentecostal renewals.
Well, with Zionism and the Hebrew Christian Union back at the end of the 19th century, that they really stirred up a lot. And movements such as the Proto-Jehovah Witnesses, that is the Bible Students movement, that was really big in their evangelism package as well.
Okay, and so
I don't think it was two house at that time. I think that's a more recent.
No, what I'm saying is I've seen some evidence that there was two house. In fact, maybe not exactly in the way that two house is today, but certainly had that thread running through it. But then when everything happened in 1947, 48, and then, like you said, of course, in 67, then kind of the two house thing went away completely, and this was just assumed to be the fulfillment of that. And then you, of course, growing up in church, my father being a minister and being involved in the Assemblies of God as we were, you prayed for Israel, you prayed for the peace of Israel, and which of course is biblical in the Tanakh. but also you did it in such a way that Israel was the modern state of Israel. So I guess that's what we're talking about today. I know that one of the people that we played on here a few weeks ago, where we showed Dr. Michael Brown, and he had that interview with the gentleman who was discussing, who was who and who was a Jew and different things like that. And they were, before the clip that we played, they were talking about the Ethiopians and that they practiced maybe the oldest form of Judaism that we have on the earth today, because they were left alone in the middle of Africa, and they've just done the same things over and over. So they're an interesting case study, to be sure. But then he was talking in the part that we showed, and I'm assuming quite a few people that are here today remember that, but that he showed that, hey, the Palestinians, the group that's called the Palestinians, which basically is just a term that means Arabs that lived in the land that was called Palestine since 135 AD, that were not allowed to be part of the modern state of Israel. And he pointed out this fact that it's well known among the Israeli people that when a terrorist attack happens from the Palestinians, that there's a high chance that it's going to come from a few of these certain neighborhoods. And these are the Arabs that were either force converted or converted to save their lives to Islam throughout the centuries. Then when the Jews wanted to come back and create the nation state of Israel in what was called Palestine at the time, they applied for citizenship because they had never left. They had never been deported from whenever the days were, from the Syrian deportations, the Babylonian deportations, and then all the way through the Roman deportations. These people had remained, and they felt like if anybody should be considered an Israelite, they should be, because they had, even though their religion had changed, their nationality hadn't, and they were rejected, and they were not allowed to be a part of the state of Israel. So now they see, because they know that this is where our family's from. We know we're Israelites. You can call us whatever name you want. Our families have lived here forever since we can remember. So that they would look then at the state of Israel as an imposter. So that, flies in the face, number one, of how I was raised in the church, thinking that the nation state of Israel has to be what the Tanakh refers to as Israel. And then number two, it even flies in the face, even though he was very accepting of the evidence, I think it flies in the face of even what Dr. Michael Brown purports to believe. He definitely sees Zionism as a good thing, I think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but from the different interactions I've seen him have on YouTube and Twitter and different things, even if he knows that they have not accepted the Messiah, even if he knows that there's things about it that are political and that are not right in the eyes of Yah, that ultimately he feels this is what it's going to lead to, at least the perfect government there. So, which is all very interesting. And before I had studied this at all, I probably would have thought very similar to Dr. Brown. But now there's other evidence that comes up. And I just wanted to know, before we present that evidence and discuss it, does anybody have any comments or questions, or seen any eye-opening things over the last few weeks since we had that last discussion?
A tremendous outpouring of anti-Semitism coming from certain segments of our society. It's incredible.
Yes, absolutely. And, I find it interesting, and I'll get into this in a minute too, but to me, you really have to, from studying this out now, I am seeing something very, very intriguing and specific about the anti-Semitism. So once I present this idea that this one group has, then I will share what it's caused me to look at and see. and maybe we can go from there. But there has been a definite outpouring of anti-Semitism, and not only anti-Semitism, but anti-Christianity. There are so many churches getting burned and bombed in Europe and Africa especially, that it is unprecedented, and it's all over the place right now. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the world and in America right now that is a dividing line, I think, and that's one reason I want to be a part of it. I don't want to sit back and go, oh, well, this happened on my watch and I didn't like what happened. I think that we're called to be involved in our communities, because if we are following Torah, if we are following Messiah, then we are to be the light of the world. But if we don't have any other questions or comments, and if we do, please pipe up. But coming upon some of these different topics, looking at some of these different topics on Twitter, I came upon a group of Orthodox Jews, and they are very religious, and they are very serious, and they are very anti-Zionism. And when I first saw it, I didn't know if it was like a parody account or, because, with your mindset growing up the way I did, it was just very much, if we are, if we're pro the Bible, then we're pro-Israel, and pro-Israel must mean, Zion Israel, Zionist Israel that is current. And this group of Jews, they have a website, and you can go look them up. They're called TorahJews.org. So TorahJews.org. And they have shown, or at least they feel like they've shown, that the founders of Zionism are very anti-religious, and their whole point in bringing Israel as a nation state back to the place of Israel was to have Israel be defined as a nationality and not as a religion. And the TorahJews.org say absolutely not. At no point in our history were we only defined as a nationality and not as a religion. And as a matter of fact, anyone who was not of our nationality and wanted to follow the Torah could join us and become a part of us, and they would become Jews regardless of their nationality. And I thought, whoa, that's true. Biblically speaking, just take, one of the most obvious cases of Ruth, the grandmother of David. She was not nationally a Jew, but she rejected her nationality's religious system and accepted the Jewish idea. And I say Jewish, the Israelite idea. Yeah, Caleb as well. There's quite a few. Yes, and they are absolutely not followers of Yeshua. That's why I said in the beginning, Professor Smith, that they are Orthodox Jews. So
are they Haredi? Are they Haredi Jews? That's what it sounds like.
I don't know, but I'm not concerned with anything about them other than their stance on this one point. At this point, I'm not trying to join them or anything, that's for sure. The point I'm making is they have a logical case that makes sense that anyone who wanted to be a part of Israel proper did not have to be nationally related to anybody. They had to, like the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, they were judged on the content of their character and how it lined up with Torah observance and monotheism, rather than they were judged on their nationality. And they became Israelites if their character lined up with Torah, and they made a commitment to do so. So one of the things that they post every now and again on their Twitter account is this quote by Vladimir Jabotinsky, and he is one of the founders of Zionism, and his quote is, "Take every characteristic of a Jew, imagine its opposite, that is a Zionist." So he was trying to say everything you think about Jews as far as religious and this and that from back in the day, whatever it is, imagine its opposite, and that is Zionism. Meaning we want to be completely completely void of religiousness and just be a nation because of our DNA. And so that's one thing that they would strongly oppose, because they don't like that. They think that these Torah Jews think that the Torah is what binds people and not anything else, and certainly not nationality. I'm going to go through here. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I'm going to go through their Torah, their Twitter account, and see if I can't find some more things. They say here that from the start, Zionism was categorically opposed by all leading rabbis as the very antithesis of Judaism. Anti-Zionism was never an isolated belief, but rather a broad consensus. They say it's sad to see how Israel, the nation state, has transformed the Holocaust Memorial Day into a pity party to promote Zionism, as their record of aiding Jews is worse than dismal. Today, we vouch to never forget the alleged saviors who used the suffering of the Jewish people to establish Zionism. They put up some different things. Rabbi Reuben Grozovsky from 1886 to 1953 says, someone who says the land of Israel is the political homeland of the Jewish people is mixing idol worship into Judaism. That's a strong statement. Rabbi Shimon Schwab says, we love Zion, and therefore we are non-Zionists. We are Jews who hate racism because we all have been the foremost victims of racism. We hate racism because all men were created in God's image, be they white, black, or yellow. And then with a background of the Balfour Declaration, a quote from Claude Montefiore, president of Anglo-Jewish Association, Zionism and Zionistic activities not only depress Judaism by putting nationality first and religion second, but they injure Judaism by combining religion and nationality. And then David Alexander, the vice president, said, emancipated Jews in this country regard themselves primarily as a religious community. They hold Judaism to be a religious system with which their political status has no concern. And they maintain that as citizens of the countries in which they live, they are fully and sincerely identified with the national spirit and interests of those countries. So they did not like the idea that when Donald Trump the other day was talking to whatever Jewish organization and saying, you guys reelected the prime minister, they said, no, we didn't reelect anybody. We don't live in the nation state of Israel, and we have nothing to do with it. We follow Yahweh where we are. Let's say Yahweh, we follow Hashem where we are, and we are Americans, and we are involved in this society, and we have the religious freedom to follow that.
So, hey, Rich, so this group, they live in the United States. They don't live in Israel, correct?
I would say that most of them live here, yeah.
Okay, because I know that there is some of those groups that are like that. A lot of those people, they live right there in Israel, and they benefit over that same nation state that they curse. I think the Haredi is one of the biggest ones. And people get confused when they hear, oh, these are Orthodox Jews saying this. And I think a lot of that does get become fodder for other stuff. But that's very interesting. I have to check into them because I've never heard of them. I've always wrapped them up with the Haredi and the other groups like that.
Okay, hey, Professor Smith, you seem to have some strong opinions. You got a mic there? You can share them with us? I know you're putting them in the chat.
He just left.
Oh, he just left. Okay. I suspect they would change their tune if they found themselves in the midst of a Holocaust in the States and the only friend place left for them was the fellow Jews over in Eretz Israel. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that anybody would run.
I think he got knocked off. He'll be back, I think.
Okay, any thoughts, any ideas? Anybody like it, not like it, think that it's an interesting change of pace? Anyone? One thing I've noticed, the point I was going to make earlier, was that since these guys have been around, meaning in my consciousness, I've been looking at the attacks, the anti-Semitism attacks that Jackson was talking about. And I've noticed that, so they're saying, hey, religion, the religious aspect of it is what makes us Jews. And the nationality doesn't. And if you're a, whatever it is, anti-Torah Jewish person, then you're not really Jewish. I mean, they don't come out and say that, but that's basically the inference you can take from their premise. Then all of these anti-Semitic attacks always happen, and from what I've seen, you guys can correct me if I haven't seen some of the stuff, but it's always on religious Jews. Anti-Semitism is not happening to the secular Jew that's living in the middle of New York. Somebody posted some anti-Semitic attacks the other day. 2 happened back to back, I think, in one city, and it was on religious Jews. They were attacking religious Jews. Now, you could argue, hey, it's easier to spot a religious Jew than it is a non-practicing Jew, and I would give you that. But certainly, we're not seeing any attacks on secular Jews, any at all. I'm not. Has anybody noticed one lately? Or would you guys agree, now that you think about it, that it's always on religious people?
Well, Nick Berg was not a religious Jew, by the way. And we saw his beheading on live TV. There were others during that time period that were executed that were not religious Jews, and they were also killed. I think, honestly, I don't think that the enemy cares at this point whether you're religious or not. Even during the Holocaust, guess what? The Chabad Lubavitch died with the Breslov and the secular in the same gas chamber. Okay.
From what I just looked up real quick, it does say Nick Berg was of the Jewish faith. So I don't.
He was Jewish, but he was not a religious Jew. I remember that specifically.
Okay, so yeah, are there incidents? Absolutely. I think he was probably taken more because he was a freelance journalist. But at the same time, just look. I mean, I'm looking for recent examples because obviously the whole idea being that there was a conflation of both religious and secular Jews coming into the Holocaust. Everybody was just thrown in there together, and maybe this is one of the reasons why there was such a drive to get the nation state going right after all of that got taken away. I'm just saying, recently, have you seen in the uptick? I can only think of religious Jews being persecuted. And I don't mind being wrong at all. I just am trying to figure it out, trying to, get more resources and see. This is obviously a big, it's a big subject and people have strong feelings about it. And like I said, I'm not I'm not advocating one way or the other, although I am trying to look at it from their perspective and see, does their perspective hold any water? But I would say that it always is, I think right now, Israel under Netanyahu is very much secular. The politics there and whatever is politically correct is very much similar to what is in America in a lot of ways. And so it's certainly not any sort of state that's trying to, I think the biggest thing for me as far as morality and different things like that is the different things you see as far as them dealing with the Palestinians that are launching rockets at them. And they're not, you have the memes of, a Palestinian hiding behind a baby versus an IDF soldier standing in front of a baby, different things like that. And I think you see the morality come out there, to be sure. And I think that there are a lot of people that are living in Israel that are probably trying to follow the Father the best that they can. So this is certainly not just an attack on everybody. I'm just trying to parse it out. Anybody else got anything? Is everybody just listening quietly?
Yeah, I do. I have something. I think that the idea of the Jewish state being there, some people would go as far as to say that the Father has no clue what he's doing. I don't think you are, but it's like, the Father was shocked by what happened. Now, what we have to figure out is what is going on, what is intended, what does he want to do? He allowed it to happen. May not have been, you can go through all the direct will, permissive will, all the church stuff, but they're there now. He has something going on. We have to figure out what that is. I don't say that I know, so I can't provide you an answer, but there's something that they're supposed to do. Maybe through some process, processionalism, a long time process, they will become the people that he wants.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, like I said at the beginning, I think that that's what the way like Dr. Brown would look at it, at least. My counterpunch, and I halfway agree with that, but to play devil's advocate, my counterpunch would be, there's a lot of things going on in the world that we could sit back and say, oh, well, it looks bad, but we don't know, maybe, the Father's doing something here. And this one is more polarized because it's in the, it has to do with the land and the prophecies possibly. So we don't want to, speak against it if in fact if like you're saying that he could be up to something, which I hear, but at the same time, we have no solid proof that it is him. And obviously he's allowing it to happen, but he's allowing a lot of things to happen that have nothing to do with him. So I think to say that just because he's allowing it to happen doesn't mean that he's up to something, quote unquote, with it. Although, like you said, I think he very well could be. Does that make sense? My first thought on it is, something's going on in the Middle East, so he's got to be up to something. And for what it's worth, that's true, but or could be true. But I think that the people that are truly following him need to stand up. It's almost like, right now with the polarizing issues of abortion and the fight that's going on there, the people have to stand up. The people have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to allow this anymore, or as bad as it is, it's never going to change. And so I think that the people that are involved there the ones that are following the Father need to stand up and like you said, that this idea that some people are anti-Zionist, but they're benefiting from the system because they live over there, then they need to be ones standing up and saying something as well, and maybe making some of those sacrifices to show that it's legitimate. But I think that if we don't stand up as followers of the Father, I think that then the people who are not followers get to determine and get to decide. And I don't think that's the way he played it. I'm not one that looks at the providence of God like a Calvinist. I don't think that he just directs and dictates everything. Matter of fact, I swing way far the other way, that sometimes and a lot of times he wants to do something, but he's commanded us to stand up and do it. And when we don't, he allows the bad thing in its place to happen, or the less good thing in its place to happen. So I think that there can be nothing but good that would come out of people who have influence in that arena to demand in one way or another, or to start bringing light to this idea that the nation state of Israel is not following Torah and is not following the Father, and they're promoting anti-Torah concepts, and it needs to stop, just like it's incumbent upon us in America to do the same, especially with the number one thing right now, abortion, and say this is not okay. That would, separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, on both counts a lot quicker than we just benignly go through life and not have any controversy because we want to have an idea or a theological point, but don't want to put it into practice, I guess would be.
Hey, Rich,
yeah.
I believe that that's going to happen. I believe that they are going to have that confrontation, and Israel is going to become a religious state. And the reason why I can tell you that is if you will listen to what the enemy is saying about Israel. If you go back in the notes of General Gamal Abdel Nasser, General Nasser always referred to Israel as a religious state. Okay? So sometimes the enemy will give you a little bit of truth, and even Hitler referred to it when he was having the Jews sent to the gas chambers and murdered on work gangs and stuff like that. What did he refer to the Jewish people as? It wasn't about the secular Jew. It was about the Torah.
Absolutely. And that's my whole point. There was no nation state. But there was no nation state with Hitler. Exactly.
Well, see, remember, Israel was a nation state under King David, under a succession of kings, but it was also a religious state. So, and that's the way the enemy looks at it. The enemy looks at the state like Iran.
Sure, I understand that. I would counter and say, though, that the Father didn't want them to be a nation state. He told them, don't have a king.
Exactly.
Which makes it all the more interesting that Hitler looked at them as religious and tried to destroy the religiousness out of them. And to me, it would almost make sense. I don't have any evidence for it, but just thinking logically, trying to think it through as a test in logic, it would make sense then that they go, we just got destroyed for being religious. We need to get this Balfour, what was promised to us by Balfour, pushed through so that we can have a secular nation state, so where people don't want to hate us because we're religious. That could very well have been the premise behind wanting to push this forward, or at least seeing it actually done in the mid-40s.
And also think about this too. A lot of people had just come through the Holocaust in Poland, in Russia, in Germany, and all those areas that was controlled by the German SS. They just saw a horrible crime portrayed or perpetrated upon not just Jewish people, but the disabled, minorities, other people, things of that nature. They just witnessed this horrible thing. I can't imagine what it's like. And I've talked to it in college. I've done interviews for some of my classes with Holocaust survivors. And as they took me through that experience, there was a very visible reaction to that experience. Some of these people, they lost their entire families. And they're having to start again anew. So that also could be a reaction. This thing was so bad, we need to get our own land and try to stay out of the way of people. You know what I'm saying? So
no, absolutely. You know, sometimes we get so wrapped up in kind of conspiracy theories or, you know, spiritual war going on. Sometimes there's just very real reasons, like you're saying, that people do things, and the reasons that they do them aren't necessarily bad. Now, does that make all of their actions correct? No, and that's where you have to parse it out.
Right. And I think what God was saying too is that look, Yahweh is not dumb, he's not stupid, and he's not mentally retarded. That land over there, he told them, of course the land is smaller now than it was that he showed in the Bible what it was supposed to be. He allowed that to happen. Remember, you guys have heard me preach and teach that I believe that Yahweh's the landlord over there, and he will have over there who he wants over there. And, you know, when we acted up, we got kicked out. When Aisha's cousin acted up, she got kicked out. So the truth of the matter is Yahweh has those people there. And right now he wants both groups there for a reason.
Yeah, I don't know that I would go that far. I don't think that he wanted, you know, that's like saying, I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily think that. I think that he lets things play out. I'm not as Calvinist as that. I think he lets things play out. So I would disagree with that.
I just don't know enough about this subject. The only thing that I wanted to add was in 72, a lot of religious people saw Richard Nixon as the savior of Israel. And he might have been. Because of he got, in that war, he had a message from Golda Meir, get some planes over here fast, because it was a secret attack that they were not ready for.
Oh, yes, I remember.
They called Nixon at 3 a.m. It's 3 a.m. Who are you going to call? Richard Nixon, and he escalated to get that warfare stuff over there so they could win that war handily. Else they probably would not have.
Well, 73 is when I first started noticing and paying attention to, you know, I would hear things, you know, I'm a baby, and I would hear things and I would see, I grew up in a religious community. And so things that happened over there in the Middle East, they concerned that community greatly. And one day I was watching the news and I asked my mother, who are those soldiers? I mean, they getting down, you know, they see the army trucks and the tanks, and it's during the 73 war. I'm like, who are these people? They look bad, boy. And when I mean bad, that means they look awesome. And of course, Miss Religious, those are the soldiers of the Almighty God. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so, you know, that's what was my first introduction to Israel and the crisis over there in the Middle East. And of course, you know, things that were going on in Africa at that time as well. So 73 was my first introduction to it. But it's a very complicated, I think it's even more complicated than we imagine.
Well, yeah, I mean, but yes, I agree. But some of it's not complicated when you see some of the leaders, you know, like I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Golda Meir was an atheist, right? She didn't even believe in God, and yet she's running this state. So could you know, Yah be doing something there? Absolutely. I don't count anything. You know, he can do whatever he wants to do when he wants to do it. But do I just automatically say because these people moved in that this is what he wanted and this is what he's doing? I can't go there either.
Well, see, here's the counter to that. Okay, what if they did not move in there? Guess what would have happened? They would have continued killing them in Poland, in Russia, and Czechoslovakia. Look, those people were insistent that they want those people gone.
Well, I mean, you say they would have kept killing them. They meaning who?
I mean, the communists over there in Poland and Russia, you would have had the different. Remember, those areas in Eastern Europe are very, and I studied this in college, that they have a history and dyed in the wool history of pogroms and anti-Semitism.
Anti-religious Semitism.
Yes, I'll go with you there. I'll go with you there. The point is, look, even though the Holocaust had stopped, the residual effects of the Holocaust didn't really cease until 1950-51.
One thing that absolutely. One thing that I find interesting, though, a little bit of a counter to that, is that from the family that I knew that lived in Palestine and they were kicked out in 1947 and lost everything. They had bought a home, and that they were Arabs and they were Christian, and they were kicked out, and they didn't get any reparations for their house, and they had to move to Lebanon. They explained that even before the nation state of Israel, and looking back on it, I don't think they were very friendly towards the nation state of Israel. They said that there were many Israeli Jewish people that were moving to Israel and were buying land. And I can't remember the exact thing that the wife said, but she said like maybe 20%, if that's too high. But man, I think that's what she said, of the land had been bought up by private citizens that were Jewish, and they were moving in. So this thing was going to happen anyway. People were already wanting to go back to the land, and private citizens were going to be doing it. And I think it was almost looked at as a bad thing that now this political entity moved in to force people out and to take credit for this, when it was happening naturally anyway, and would have been a lot better off, and then let the local people form their own government the way they wanted to, rather than the UN saying this is what's going to happen.
And the United States was right with them on that too.
I don't know about that. I don't know enough information. I know that we backed the Balfour signing once it was signed, but I don't know. Could it be that something was happening organically and spiritually, and then
and that's my point right
and
there.
The devil swooped in with the nation state, the political side of things, and did things in an opposite way to try to take control of as much of it as possible. That's an interesting proposition.
Well, my thought has always been, and I don't know, we probably have the information from the same place, but people were already doing this. Holocaust survivors were already doing this. Groups coming from Europe or wherever were already coming in the first place. Menachem Begin, who ended up becoming Prime Minister of Israel in the 80s, he's not from there. He's from Poland. And these guys had already moved there. They were having some things going on internally with the IDF and the sources there and the British. But the point is, I believe that it was already happening. And I think that once the war was over, once they got political power, it could be that they may have rushed things. But like I said, I don't believe that Yahweh sees this as an accident, and that he may have allowed some things to happen there. Now, was there wrong that went on there? Absolutely, because this was a Lebanese Christian you were talking about, right, Rich? I think George Norrie is a Lebanese Christian.
No, they were Arab Palestinian, quote unquote, Christians, just Arab Christians that got forced relocated to Lebanon.
Okay, and so they
Anglicans.
What's that?
2% of the population of the so-called Arabs over there are Anglican Christians.
Okay,
I ran into a lot of them when I was there.
And the Anglicans are much more charismatic in Europe and Africa than they are in America. Anyway, go ahead.
So we have a situation where there were people that probably got hurt in the middle of this, and that includes our brother Christians Doesn't matter whether they're Palestinians, doesn't matter whether they're from Iran, they are our brothers. Doesn't matter whether they're from Judah, they are our brothers. And Yahweh is going to parcel that out. And I agree with you here, Rich, that we have to do something, whether it's in the United States over abortion, over homosexual rights, whether it's the abuse of children or sex trafficking, or we have to do something, whether it's the people of Israel being off track for the moment. Now, I don't have an issue with the Israeli state as it is right now, because I still believe that Yahweh allowed that to happen. But I do believe that he's going to straighten out the rough edges, because he says so in his word, that he's going to straighten this stuff out. But we have to be the vanguard of assisting in straightening that stuff out. It's just to what are we supposed to do, when we're supposed to do it, and how we're supposed to do it. So that's my whole position on it.
All right, Allison, come on, spill it. What do you got? What are you thinking about all this?
Oh, I don't have any idea. This is, tangling with prophecy stuff isn't my thing anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I agree with you 100,000,000%. I wouldn't look at this though as tangling with prophecy, as I would look at this as trying to see if a group, i.e. the nation state of Israel, is trying to use prophecy for their own devious ends, or are they, legitimate, I guess. Not from a, hey, I'm trying to get all of the prophecy stuff correct, but I was just reading 2 Peter today. Hey, there will be people among you that are wolves, and they're going to do false prophecies and false teachings and all of this. And if you look on, I was just browsing through some of that true TorahJews.org. There's a lot of stuff on there. You read that, and they're backing it up with fact and or circumstantial evidence about, hey, they're overblowing anti-Semitism here, and they're trying to conflate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism to where if you do one, you automatically do the other, and that's not the case. And so there's a lot of things to suspect about that. I don't know. I'm assuming, Allison, you were kind of, I don't know about growing up the same way, but just as a kid or as a young Christian, seeing the state of Israel as Israel from the Tanakh, right?
Oh yes, definitely. It was in the group I was with previously. Every time some major, they're still thinking that this year will be something because it's the 70th year, or possibly the 71st year is going to be something. And I don't speculate on that stuff anymore, but there's a lot out there that says that the whole thing of the whole Zionist movement is run by some very satanic agencies, but you take all of this with a grain of salt. It depends on your viewpoint.
And I'm not trying to go there. Again, sometimes we get so much into the conspiracy theory of it that sometimes there's just some real reasons in the real world why certain people made real choices, and they could be good reasons or bad reasons, and it is not necessarily some evil satanic conspiracy. Those are out there, I'm sure, but anytime you're dealing with the chosen people, then obviously that's going to amp up the possibility, but it doesn't mean that every action that's taken is necessarily that. It can just be that there are greedy people who want to take advantage of a certain situation. It could be that simple. So yeah, I don't know about conspiracy theory at all. And I'm not sold that, was mentioned earlier, that that the Father might not be allowing this and is going to do what he's going to do with this. But it's also just as possible to me that he's going to destroy what this is completely and build up his own thing. So, who knows? I just was interested to hear your take on it. Anyone else? All right. Well, without going any other crazy places.
In the matter of prophecy.
Who's got the question?
I've got something in the prophetic line but I think I'll post it later because I've got to work it out a little more. I just learned something about social media that might have some prophetic aspect here. I was going to tell you, but I think I'm just going to write it down. Sorry.
Okay. Kay, did you have something?
I've just got a question. I am very interested in this entire topic, and I know so little about it, so I don't know. I don't feel grounded.
Sure.
My concerns are for myself and for my household. My concerns are related to what does the word say that I am to be expecting and watching for. So when I see that Yeshua says that at some point he's going to send his angels to the four corners of the earth to gather the remnant back, I don't see how that expectation was met in 1947. So when people tell me that that the Jews, that Israel went back to the land, I don't see that whole family assembled. So that's where my interest, kind of my curiosity is.
Right. No, absolutely. I would agree with that. And that's not to say that it couldn't be the beginnings of that, for sure. But like we were saying, it was organically starting to happen anyway. And then this group came in and kind of took over the marketing of it. And so is it possible that it could go either way? Absolutely. And I agree with you. I don't know a lot about this topic. I've just kind of got into this. And so studying it out a little bit, I don't even feel there's certain things that I've seen that I'm not sure of. So I didn't even say them today. And I'm sure that in a year I go back and look at this particular video and I'll think, man, I knew nothing about this subject before studying it out. But, it would be interesting. Man, I wonder if we couldn't get a couple of people, reach out to a couple of people, Jackson, and just see what, if there's any experts, for or against. Maybe we could even get some of these TorahJews.org guys on here to give their spiel.
Yeah, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, and because they obviously want support, but they don't want the support to go to the nation of Israel. So. Anyway, yeah, I'm also interested to, study this out a little more. If we could all do some digging and maybe in another month or so, bring it back up once we've had a little more time. And I am interested, Jackson, to hear what your question might be later on.
Yeah, I'm going to write it out.
Well, feel free to email it to me or text it or something.
Okay.
All right, that's it, unless anybody has anything else, because if we start something else, we'll go in a completely different direction, I think.
Thank you all. Very good. We got to bone up a little bit on this topic, don't we?
Absolutely.